So I imagine the kind of question that you maybe are asking yourself, especially someone who hasn't worked in the industry, what is the issue with the way that things are set up, or the expectation that's placed upon you? I think the difficulty, and what I found so difficult, is the expectation and the pressure placed on you as a junior member of the team. I called it a toxic work environment earlier, and I think that is honestly the fairest way to put it. I think, again, depending on where you work, I can only speak from my own personal experience. Some places I know from speaking to other people have kind of limits on the amount of accounts that you work on. So, say for example, maybe five, and you'll have five different clients, and that's the kind of cap that you'll get. Where I was working, it was basically just you get given whatever needs covered, and there's an expectation that the whole industry, especially as an agency, is built around you're getting paid money from a client. We need money. Money is king, and I get that. I understand how businesses work, but I think there is that kind of get stuff done at any cost. It doesn't matter how or when or why or how long you're working or how kind of stressful you're feeling, or the pressure that's being put upon you. It's just this: you need to do X amount of outputs a day, and that's just it. Like, there's no leniency, or there's no understanding. It's just go, 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 100% capacity all the time. There's slight ebbs and flows to this. Sometimes it's kind of more manageable, but I would say there's not a day where I can honestly say you're not busy. Obviously, busy is a vague term, but I would say it is very much a case of you are constantly producing something new or tracking something new or getting pulled in this different directions. And I think that's the crux of the argument, or the feeling that I have, is that, truth be told, you never had a chance to focus. You never had a chance to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to get my head into this thing, without Microsoft Teams notification, the dreaded hey coming up, or we also had Slack, and we had emails, and it was this constant kind of back and forth of you're trying to produce, the best work that you can, especially as I think as a newer person in the job. I don't feel, or didn't feel at the time, that I was kind of phoning things in. I was really kind of trying to give it my all and into everything. And I think there's such a deep frustration of, you're working on 8 or 9 different accounts, and you're expected to just produce, obviously to the highest standard possible, because you're being paid for it, and it has to make the company that you're working for look good. But it just felt like an impossible, endless task, to be honest. It was just, if you have 8 or 9 clients and they all want something today or tomorrow or whenever, and the deadlines were often kind of ASAP, there was no flexibility. It was just, you have to hit these deadlines. They're paying us. You have to get this done. We have to keep them happy. You have to keep them happy. And I think there was just that expectation of sacrifice, where we would all start. I can certainly speak for myself and a lot of the people that I would work with, and I know kind of in the industry as a whole, we all start early. We all almost always work through lunch. We almost always finish late. I know the amount of people who work weekends, and because you just have to get these deadlines done. That's what's kind of drilled into you over and over and over again. It's just this, any means necessary, no matter how burnt out you are, no matter how much you're struggling, you have to produce these things, and you have to do it to the standard, to this kind of really high standard, basically. And I think it's very, very difficult to deal with those expectations day in, day out, without kind of being worn down by them. As I say, we were often kind of times on 8 or 9 different accounts, and if you think about all those different emails from 8 or 9 individual clients or more, sometimes there's several per account, kind of emailing you needing this different thing or this random favor at any given time, and you're trying to get into this thing, and okay, I finally got half an hour to focus on this big task that I need to get done for tomorrow, and then all of a sudden, the worst possible time, an email comes in, and shit, okay, I've lost my focus. I'm now over here. Shit, someone needs me over here. I'm running back to here, and there's that kind of constant strain of focus, and it just uses so much mental energy. I can't describe it any other way, just in a sort of deep almost primal draining in a way, like just at this fundamental level. You just feel so worn down by this constant running around. And I think one of the ways I would describe it is you get given tasks, obviously, constantly throughout the week, and you would just always you'd always have to produce everything to 100%. So, for example, say I get given oftentimes 10 or 12 tasks to do in a day, which maybe doesn't sound like a lot. If you've got, say, 8 hours for the average working day, but of course these things take a lot of time. And another thing is there's constant meetings, which kind of also pulls your attention and limits the scope of what you're able to do and the amount of time you have to do it in. But if you've got 10 or 12 deadlines, and those are all kind of weighing on your mind, kind of taking your attention, even if you produce 9 of those, say 10, to the kind of highest standard possible, and you get it across in good time, there's things where it has to get checked by the account manager, for example, if you're an executive, or if you're a manager, by the directors, because there's kind of rules to make sure, for kind of quality verification purposes, that you would always have someone else double checking your work. So that kind of would delay things, if they weren't free. But that's kind of as an aside. But you have these kind of nine pieces of work that are really good, or at least the best standard that you can be expected to produce. Because again, you're just constantly churning out so much material that, of course, there's going to be mistakes that bleed in. But of course, the second person rule was to kind of account for that. But you're producing 9 bits of work, and the 10th is maybe not up to standard. You missed a correction that a client asked for, or you missed an update from a random email threads because you've got things pinging left and right. It's on Slack, it's on Teams, it's on email. It's someone said it to you, in person fleetingly as you're kind of walking past or before a meeting, and all these different things. And it's just that constant pulling of your attention that makes it so difficult to produce consistently, basically perfect work, or at least really, really high standard of work on everything. And because, as I said, you could be, for example, on 8 or 9 different accounts, not always would people talk to each other. So you might have a director that, I've just been fucking, grinding out. I've produced, XYZ, all these different things for this event that's happening soon. Okay, you worked really hard. And that manager's like, oh, great work, appreciate it's a tight deadline, blah, blah, blah. We're getting kind of all this stuff done. And but then on the other hand, you've got a different account manager who's not working on the same team, and they're like, where's this thing that I asked for? You said you'd do it, or I asked you to do it, and you're like, okay, I'm trying so hard, but I've got these kind of deadlines here pulling my attention. I really need to focus on this event. But then they're like, oh, actually, but this is also coming up. This deadline's also approaching. I'm also under pressure. Get it done. At any kind of means, by any means necessary. And I think it is just that lack of communication that is so toxic in this agency. And again, I know I say this agency, but it is the industry as a whole. You talk to anyone, and it's the same situation of, sometimes you get nice managers and people that run things really well, but is that just constant pressure, especially in the wake of COVID? Clients reduce budgets and things. The economy in the UK, where I'm based, is not doing the best, so there's also that kind of pressure as well, that clients aren't spending as much. You're expected to do more for less, and I think it's this kind of a lose-lose situation where you work so hard and you hit, as I say, 9 out of 10 perfectly, or certainly to the highest standard that you can, and you're kind of remembered for the one that you weren't able to produce. And I think there's that kind of feeling that nothing is ever good enough. You're doing absolutely everything that you can, and you're only ever remembered for the mistake that you made, or the thing that you missed, or the meeting that you were late to, even though you had a bunch of meetings before and you kind of told someone, and they were like, why are why are you late, but your meeting was overrunning, and things like this. And I think it is such a difficult situation to deal with, because it is the kind of mental noise and the mental strain of all these kind of different people needing all these different things, and just trying to keep track of all that as well, even just the work itself and the things that you are expected to produce. Because it's weird, because the way that accounts are set up, it's very I don't know how to describe it other than bitty. You know, you'll do this small thing, then this small thing, and this small thing. You will have big things sprinkled in there that are kind of easier to know that you have to do. I.e., if you're writing a media release to send to news teams to kind of cover that story, you know that's a big task that has to be produced. You know, the launch is in a week. You have to produce it in the next couple of days so it can go to internal review from your teams so they can look at it, and then it has to go to the client, has to look at it, then the client might be feedback and ends, and then you have to kind of make those amends, and then you have to get that out to media. And there's so many chains of approval, and there's so many quick moving deadlines that it just becomes, yeah, this sort of mental overstimulation. It is really, really, really difficult to deal with. I don't know if that's coming across in hopefully it is in what I'm trying to describe, but there just is so much expectation placed in you. As I say, especially as a kind of junior member of the team, I do think you're not always given that you're not always given that kind of benefit of the doubt that you are doing your best. I think there's that kind of, oh well, why is this thing not up to the standard it needs to be at? Now you're making work for me as a manager who's coming to look at it, and it's not, you know, I have to feed back to you and you have to kind of do it again and kind of send it back to me. And there's this kind of extra step that you've created as an account executive, whereas realistically you're doing absolutely everything that you can, but you're just not able to kind of keep afloat in front of these crazy deadlines, essentially.